All right, there you go. Jerusalem attacked today after the Hamas militant group launched rockets near the holy city after hundreds of Palestinians clashed with Israeli police at a mosque. You can see some of the action there. Israel responding with dozens of airstrikes across the Gaza Strip, killing 20 people. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the militant group crossed a red line and is warning this fighting could drag on. We're joined now by our friend Christian Whiton, former Trump administration senior advisor, and Dave Wurmser, senior analyst and director of the Center for Security Policy and senior fellow at the Kohelet Policy Forum. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on.
Great to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Of course, yeah. So this is obviously nothing new for this region. Dave, we'll start with you. Or actually, Christian, let's start with you. What are your initial thoughts on this?
Rob, I think it actually is new. I mean, it's not new if you go way, way back, but the Middle East and Israel in particular has been, frankly, a sea of stability recently throughout the Trump administration. Certainly the latter half, you had a remarkable peace between Israel and certain Arab states, and really an end to violence. Also, the Iranian regime was really put on its back heel, put on the defense by very strong sanctions, very strong language, very strong military posture from the United States. And what we have here, 160 missiles being lobbed at Jerusalem. You also have a naval confrontation in the Arabian Gulf. You have Iran enriching uranium up to a level way beyond what it needs for energy purposes. And, you know, I think there's a new government in Israel that's coming about that's being tested, but also the United States is being tested. A cynic might say it's taken the Democrats all of 4 months to screw up the Middle East.
Yeah, that is a good point. It's maybe not something new traditionally, historically, but we were making some great progress. It seems it's gone now. We just watched some video there, the Iron Dome over Israel in action as it blocks a lot of those missiles coming in. Dave, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar tweeting this in response to the attacks. Quote, many will tell you Israel has a right to defend itself, to safety and security, but are silent on whether Palestinians have those rights too. Until we can defend the rights of Palestinians, just as we do Israelis, we have no leg to stand on when it comes to justice or peace. Dave, what do you make of that statement?
Well, what I make of it is she's entirely ignorant. I mean, the Israelis were literally minding their own business, as they usually do. And you saw about a month and a half now of escalatory rhetoric from the Palestinian Authority and from Hamas that deliberately has talked about escalating and requiring escalation, inciting their people to go and kill Jews. We had a TikTok intifada where you would see Arabs on buses and so forth just beating up Jews and getting likes and dislikes. And this eventually escalated at the instigation of Hamas and the instigation of the Palestinian Authority. And eventually this is where you wind up with rockets, missiles, and riots.
Right.
So
if you ask the other side, though, the Palestinians would argue that they're being pushed from their homes by the Jews. This is what they say every time, is they give some kind of excuse like that. Is there any validity to that?
No, there's no validity to that. There are no Palestinian evictions underway that are based on either a home that wasn't purchased or a deed that genuinely belongs to a Jewish family. These houses in Sheikh Jarrah that people talk about and that Elizabeth Warren called abhorrent and illegal were Jewish deeds from the 19th century even that have been proven in various courts. They are titled lands to Jews that were reclaimed in the 1970s. The courts there, including, by the way, the Jordanian occupation from 1948 to 1967 of Jerusalem, recognized these lands as Jewish lands, and therefore they were called enemy territory, enemy deeds, and held them. So this is incontrovertibly Jewish homes that are being where there are two of them that are occupied right now by their owners.
Understood.
The rest, the Supreme Court in Israel said, the Arabs can stay if they pay rent, but now they have for about 50 years not paid rent.
Sure.
So they're squatters.
Understood.
And so now this is a concept of eviction.
Okay. All right, Christian, elsewhere in the Middle East where there's a lot of activity, we're definitely back to the old ways, pre-Trump. The Navy announced that it seized an arms shipment of thousands of assault weapons and other weapons aboard a ship going toward Yemen. According to investigators, the vessel was allegedly coming from Iran. It comes as a U.S. Coast Guard ship fired about 30 warning shots at a group of 13 Iranian fast boats today, kind of trying to pick on us a little bit and try to see what happens. What do you make of all of this increased activity around Iran?
Yeah, it's interesting, again, how long it has been since this type of activity occurred, at least in the manner it has. So we had, 30 rounds fired today, 50 caliber ammo at a large flotilla of small Iranian boats. And this is how the Iranians are thought likely to engage the U.S. Navy if, God forbid, there ever were open warfare. They're not going to go one-to-one against the U.S. aircraft carrier or a Ticonderoga-class cruiser, which was involved today, or even the Coast Guard cutters that are out there. It would be swarming our ships with small boats, probably laden with explosives, similar to the attack that happened in the Gulf of Aden in 2001. So this is very serious what's going on. It also happened last month in April, but before that, it didn't happen for 4 years. Basically, in the summer of 2017, the Iranians did something similar. They were testing the Trump administration, and they realized they were dealing with a very tough administration that was going to push back on all Iranian aggressive activity. Sure. And so they're doing that again. And I think they're going to get a pretty different answer this time, because the Biden officials, the administration, is up in Vienna trying to get the deal of the century out of the Iranians. And they can't, can't give them enough goodies to get them to say yes.
Yeah, so true. Dave, here at home, the FBI confirming that a hacking group based in Russia called DarkSide, responsible for the ransomware attack that closed the Colonial pipeline here in the U.S. All that gas coming up to the East Coast, it's going to be a big problem. Here's the Deputy National Security Advisor Ann Neuberger earlier today.
We recognize that victims of cyber attacks often face a very difficult situation. Colonial is a private company and will defer information regarding their decision on paying a ransom to them.
Would the administration offer any advice on whether or not to pay a ransom?
So typically that is a private sector decision, and the administration has not offered further advice at this time.
So, Dave, it's an interesting situation. You've got this ransom situation with a private company, and they don't have a lot of answers there from the White House. How should this be handled?
Well, these massive, sophisticated cyber attacks often have state involvement. This is an international state issue that needs to be dealt with. Yeah. To throw it onto a private company is an abdication of government authority here and responsibility. By the way, it's overall this pattern with this administration. You see it also in Colombia and so forth, that there is a loss of control with extreme speed in the last 2-3 months that was for 4 years completely absent.
So true.
So you really can see across the world a sudden loss of prestige and a sudden spinning out of control everywhere. And our allies are the ones who are most terrified, because they see the United States taking, quote, a neutral position between our allies and our enemies. And therefore, our enemies know that any violence drives a wedge between the allies and the United States, weakening them further. This is the same case with the private company.
Sure.
This is an American company. It deserves the protection of the United States government.
Understood. All right, Dave Wurmser and Christian Whiton. Gentlemen, thank you so much for the time. A lot to talk about, unfortunately. I wish there wasn't so much. Good to see you both, though.